ve Young Friends of Turkey işbirliğiyle düzenlenen Diyaloğu ve Çözümü Teşvik Etmek ve Avrupalı Parlamenterler Türkiye Hakkında ne düşünüyor başlıklı toplantımıza hepiniz hoş geldiniz. Şimdi açılış konuşmalarıyla TOBB ETÜ Uluslararası İlişkiler Bölümü öğretim üyesi Sayın Doçent Doktor Bilgir Demirtaş, Young Friends of Turkey Başkanı Sayın Mehmet Ünlü ve ORSAM Genel Koordinatörü Sayın Hakan Taşçı'yı dinleyeceğiz.
Teşekkür ederim. Değerli katılımcılar, ben de hepinize hoş geldiniz demek istiyorum. Young Friends of Turkey ve TESEV işbirliğinde hazırlanan raporun sunumunun üniversitemizde yapılması gerçekten bizim için büyük mutluluk verici. Ben çok kısa bir konuşma yapmak isterim. Türkiye'nin Avrupa Ekonomik Topluluğu'na ortaköy'lük başvurusunun üzerinden 56 sene geçmiş olsa bile aslında biz şunu biliyoruz. Türkiye 1959'da resmi başvuru yapmış olmasına rağmen onun öncesinde 1950'lerin başında AKÇT ilk kurulduğu dönemden itibaren Türkiye bu entegrasyon sürecini çok yakından takip etti. Sadece bu resmi düzeyde kalmadı. Aynı zamanda o dönemde Türkiye'de de aynı Avrupa ülkelerinde olduğu gibi, entegrasyonun başladığı ülkelerde olduğu gibi sivil toplum düzeyinde de bu olan süreçle ilgili bir merak vardı ve sivil toplumda da pan-Avrupacı hareketlerin o dönemde kurulduğunu biliyoruz. Türkiye-Avrupa Birliği ilişkileri tarihin herhalde hiçbir döneminde lineer bir çizgi şeklinde ilerlemedi. Eğri her zaman yukarıya doğru da çıkmadı. Bazen iki adım ileri, bir adım geri yaşandı ama her dönemin sonunda ileriye doğru atılan adımlar olduğunu ifade etmek gerekiyor. Benim burada altını çizmek istediğim nokta, Türkiye'de Avrupa Birliği tartışmaları yapılırken aslında bu rasyonel tercih kuramının söylediği kar zarar analizinin çok daha ötesine geçen bir şeydi. Ve her iki taraf için de ben bunun bu şekilde olduğunu düşünüyorum. Ve günümüz dünyasında yine çok farklı meydan okumalarla karşı karşıyayız. Türkiye'nin yakın çevresinden de gözlemlediğimiz uluslararası terörizm bir yandan, öte yandan mültecilerin içinde bulunduğu gayri insani trajik durum, kitle imha silahları ile ilgili tartışmalar ve bu dönemde de bu yeni küresel meydan okumalara karşı Türkiye-Avrupa Birliği ilişkilerinin gelişmesi bence çok önemli. Bu son ortaya çıkan problemler iki taraf arasındaki ilişkilerin ne kadar önemli olduğunu hepimize gösterdi. Ve bu problemlerin çözümü ancak uzun vadeli yaklaşımlarla gerçekleşebilir, sağlanabilir diye düşünüyorum. Kısa vadeli ara çözümler, ara ödüllerle ben bu sorunların çözülebileceğini çok da fazla düşünmüyorum. Uluslararası ilişkilerde bu algılamalar ve yanlış algılamalar meselesi benim de gerçekten çok önemsediğim bir konu. Ve TESEV'in de bu konuya özellikle TESEV'in Young Friends of Turkey işbirliğiyle bu konuya özel bir önem vermiş olmasını ben çok önemli buluyorum. Eminim bugün hazırlanacak rapor bizleri bu algılamalar ve yanlış algılamalar konusunda aydınlatacak ve bu ön yargıların karşılıklı olarak nasıl yıkılabileceğine dair bir tartışma için gerekli bir akademik altyapı hazırlayacak. Ben hem raporun hazırlanmasında emeği geçen hem de toplantı organizasyonuna katkı sağlayan herkese çok teşekkür ediyorum ve başarılı bir toplantı olmasını diliyorum.
Değerli katılımcılar, Young Friends of Turkey adına ben de sizlere hoş geldiniz demek istiyorum. Yüksek sayıda gençleri de aramızda görmek bizleri özellikle mutlu ediyor. Gençlerin AB-Türkiye ilişkilerinin gelişmesinde çok önemli ve özel bir rol aldığı üzerinde kanaatımız var. Young Friends of Turkey kısaca AB'li genç akademisyenler ve girişimciler olarak kurduğumuz AB çapında çalışma yapan Brüksel bazlı derneğimiz. Hedeflerimiz AB-Türkiye ilişkileri nasıl geliştirebiliriz? Özellikle AB sivil toplum olarak ilişkilerin gelişmesine nasıl katkı sağlayabiliriz gibi sorular çalışma gündemlerimizi belirliyor. Kendi açımdan Avusturya'da doğup büyümüş ve eğitimde orada almış birisi olarak içinde yaşadığımız Avrupa Birliği ülkelerinde hem politik hem medya gündemlerinde Türkiye'nin ve Türk toplumların çok etkin olduğunu ve özel bir rol aldığını görüyoruz. AB genişleme politikası, Türkiye-AB ilişkileri, müzakerelerin devam ettirilmesi, AB ülkelerinde de seçim gündemlerini süslediğini görüyoruz. Bu bağlamda TESEV ve Young Friends of Turkey olarak hem ulusal hem de Avrupa düzeyinde parlamenterlerin Türkiye'nin olası AB üyeliğini nasıl algıladıklarını açıklığa kavuşturmak amacıyla araştırmamızı gerçekleştirdik. Araştırma ekibimiz hepsi siyasi yelpazenin farklı taraflarında olmak üzere ulusal düzeyde 30, AB düzeyinde ise 27 parlamenterle görüştük. Araştırmamız temel olarak Türkiye'nin katılım süreci hakkındaki algıların ön yargılardan ne derece etkilendiğini ve bu tür sorunları ortadan kaldırmak için başvurulabilecek çözüm yollarını analiz ederek ulusal yasa yapıcıların retoriğini anlamayı amaçlamaktadır. Araştırmanın bulgularını TESEV araştırmacısı, Türkiye AB uzmanı Zerrin Cengiz Hanım'dan ve Young Friends of Turkey Brüksel temsilcimiz Samuel Dobry Westerbay Bey'den biraz sonra alacağız. Detaylı bir şekilde bizlerle bulgularımızı paylaşacaklar. Ben de Young Friends of Turkey adına tekrar çalışmada ve Ankara programını ve sunumunu hazırlıklarında bize destek olan TOBB ETÜ Üniversitesi ve ORSAM'ın yanında araştırma ekibimize, ismen bugün yanımızda olamayan Aybars Görgül Bey'e, Zerrin Hanım'a ve Samuel Bey'e tekrar teşekkürlerimi iletiyorum. Güzel bir program diliyorum bize.
Sayın misafirler, değerli öğrenciler, 1 Ocak 2009 yılında kurulan ve kısa adı ORSAM olan Orta Doğu Stratejik Araştırmalar Merkezi, geçtiğimiz yıllarda Türkiye'de dış politika konusunda yaşanmış olan boşluğu doldurmak, akademik dünya ile siyasi çevre arasında köprü kurmak amacıyla yola çıkmıştır. Kurumumuz, uluslararası politika konularının daha sağlıklı kavranması ve uygun pozisyonların alınabilmesi amacıyla kamuoyuna ve karar alma mekanizmalarına aydınlatıcı bilgiler sunarak farklı hareket seçenekleri içeren fikirler üretir. Etkin çözüm önerileri oluşturabilmek için ise farklı disiplinlerden gelen alanında yetkin araştırmacıların ve entelektüellerin nitelikli çalışmalarını teşvik eder. ORSAM, bölgesel gelişmeleri ve trendleri titizlikle irdeleyerek ilgililerine ulaştırabilen güçlü bir yayın kapasitesine sahiptir. İngilizce ve Türkçe yayınlanan web sitesi, 2 ayda bir çıkan Orta Doğu Analiz ve 6 ayda bir yayınlanan hakemli Orta Doğu Etütleri dergileriyle, analizleriyle, raporlarıyla ve kitaplarıyla ulusal ve uluslararası ölçekte literatürün gelişimini desteklemektedir. Bürokratların, akademisyenlerin, stratejistlerin, gazetecilerin, iş adamlarının ve STK temsilcilerinin Türkiye'de konuk edilmesini kolaylaştırarak bilgi ve düşüncelerinin gerek Türkiye, gerekse dünya kamuoyuyla paylaşılmasını sağlamaktadır. Bugün de böyle bir paylaşıma zemin oluşturan bir toplantı için buradayız. Türkiye Ekonomik ve Sosyal Etütler Vakfı, TESEV, Young Friends of Turkey, ORSAM ve TOBB Ekonomi ve Teknoloji Üniversitesi'nin birlikte düzenlediği Diyaloğu ve Çözümü Teşvik Etmek, Avrupalı Parlamenterler Türkiye Hakkında ne düşünüyor adlı projenin rapor sunumu için bir araya gelmekten ORSAM adına büyük mutluluk duyuyoruz. Birçok Avrupalı parlamenter ile Türkiye ve Türkiye'nin AB'ye katılım süreci hakkında yapılmış olan röportajlar sonucunda ortaya çıkan bu raporun Türkiye ve AB'ye üye ülkeler arasındaki iletişime ve tarafların birbirini anlamasına büyük katkılar sağlayacağına inanmaktayız. Türkiye'nin üyelik yolunda ilerlemesinde etkili olan karar alıcı mekanizmaların bakış açılarının ortaya konulması, raporu önemli yapan unsurlardan biridir. Rapor sunumu amacıyla yapılan bu toplantı sayesinde Türkiye-AB ilişkilerinin şu anki durumu ve geleceğinin de gündeme gelecek olması tüm taraflar için son derece faydalı olacaktır. Etkinliğin soru-cevap kısmında özellikle aramızda bulunan öğrenci arkadaşlarının katılımını önemsemekte ve beklemekteyiz. Sizlerin Türkiye'nin AB üyeliği yolunda bilgi ve fikir sahibi olmasına katkı sağlamak bizim için bugünün en büyük kazanımlarından biri olacaktır. Sözlerimin sonunda kıymetli vakitlerini ayırarak buraya gelen hem değerli konuşmacılara hem de siz sayın misafirlere aranızda bulunduğunuz için teşekkür ediyorum. Bu programda emeği geçen TESEV, Young Friends of Turkey ve TOBB Üniversitesi'ne zahmetleri için minnettar olduğumuzu belirtir. Herkes için faydalı bir toplantı olması dileğiyle saygılarımı sunarım.
Konuşmacılarımıza teşekkür ediyoruz. İlk oturum oturumumuz başlıyor. Oturumumuzda Türkiye ve Avrupa Birliği ilişkilerinde son durum değerlendirilecek ve ilişkilerin gelecek projeksiyonu tartışılacak. Avrupa Birliği Türkiye Delegasyonu, Siyasi İşler, Basın ve Enformasyon Bölüm Başkanı Sayın İrene Musfilos, söz sizde.
Good afternoon, distinguished professors, students, representatives of Young Friends of Turkey and ORSAM, diplomats from the European embassies, dear friends. I would like to thank you in particular, TESEV, for providing this opportunity to address such a distinguished audience and to thank the authors of this very interesting report. Last couple of weeks reminded us that the only constant in the EU-Turkey relations is the change. Last May, when the European Union delegation leadership met with the new TESEV directors, we exchanged our concerns about the loss of momentum in the EU-Turkey relationship. Today, just 5 months later, the picture has completely changed, and Turkey again became one of the priority items of discussions in Brussels and other European capitals. We now have a wide open window of opportunity for an intensive re-engagement between the EU and Turkey. All the developments unfolding since the recent visits of the European leaders, including the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, reaffirmed an old diplomatic motto saying, "Never waste crisis, there's always a silver lining to create." Indeed, a humanitarian tragedy taking place in Syria and massive refugee influx creating the migration crisis led to a re-engagement process between the EU and Turkey. We are currently undergoing a thorough re-examination of our relations and we should aim at capitalizing on this opportunity fully. If both sides use the potential properly, we will be able to speed up accession talks as well as the visa liberalization process. The upcoming progress report and later also the implementation report of the visa liberalization roadmap should be considered as guidelines for cooperation between the EU and Turkey. In such a critical juncture, TESEV and Young Friends of Turkey, Turkey's work is a very timely contribution. It sheds light on the ways in which the parliamentarians at both national and European levels perceive Turkey's prospective membership in the European Union. Understanding that national legislators' view and perceptions about Turkey is indeed one of the key issues to realize our eventual goal, which is the accession. I'm pleased to read from the report that the majority of the European parliamentarians are indeed favouring Turkish membership in the EU. Of course, the picture is not flawless. Normally interviewed European legislators' perceptions are not all positive about Turkish accession. They reported considerable concerns about personal freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of press, as well as human rights, and to finish with Kurdish issue, which all create concerns on our side. But this is not surprising. The European Commission and European External Action Service, which I represent, on various occasions also expressed concerns about the weakening of the rule of law, attacks on fundamental freedoms and human rights, as well as increased executive control over the judiciary in Turkey. Even here there is a silver lining, however. It is important to note that European legislators' criticism on Turkey is not ideologically inspired or driven. Mostly it is related to the track record of Turkey in terms of democratization. This phenomenon is positive because some negative perceptions and rhetoric on Turkish accession can change depending on Turkish track record. In other words, the ball is on the Turkish side and perceptions will follow in a natural course of action. We therefore remain optimistic. As recently expressed by Turkish political leaders, an inter-party consensual work on a new constitution and progress in Kurdish peace process would have a significant positive impact on European legislators and public support for Turkish accession. To conclude, I would stress a message that is not new. The accession process and visa liberalization dialogue, which is its integral part, are and should remain the anchor of reforms in Turkey. and in the midst of turmoil in the wider neighborhood, we should step up our engagement and cooperation. Once again, I would like to thank to the TESEV and Young Friends of Turkey and congratulate the research team on the meticulous work that they have undertaken. And I look forward to the discussion, presentation of the report and the discussion. Thank you very much.
Sayın Fidos'a teşekkür ediyoruz. İkinci oturumumuzda araştırma raporunu sunmak üzere TESEV'den Sayın Zerrin Cengiz ve Young Friends of Turkey'den Samuel Daveri Besserbay'ı dinleyeceğiz. Teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, Fidos, for your presentation, Paul. What we'll try to do, Zerrin, Cengiz and I will go through the report step by step and speak about the different kind of methodological advances, how we did the report. We spent a considerable amount of time both researching this report but also meeting with the parliamentarians at a national and at a European level, so we can kind of go through step by step how that was, and we'll of course talk to you about the findings of the report in more detail. So maybe just to give you a little bit of background on the report, as you're aware of probably, there is a common allegation, especially in Turkey, that the accession process isn't always based on technical or non-political criteria. What does that mean? That means that there is some kind of sociocultural prejudice, at least that's an allegation. We thought this allegation would be interesting to research, so we tried to put this to the test. We wanted to see whether the public bias, which after years and years of Eurobarometer reports, surveys that suggest that the majority of the European public does have a bias against Turkey, whether that finding was also prevalent among parliamentarians in the European Union, both at a European national level and a European pan-European or parliamentary level. So we wanted to look at this. Why specifically we wanted to look at it was probably because, first of all, because it would be an interesting finding and something that hasn't been looked at properly before, but also because we believe that it would be somewhat interesting to see whether what is usually being seen as a very important criteria of neutrality was in fact neutral or not. And also to see whether the core concept of the European Union, which is based on cultural diversity, was being lost or not, and so forth. So that's pretty much the idea behind the report. In the next 20 minutes or so, or a little bit more, we'll go through each section, methodology, definition of sociocultural bias, key findings, the chapters of the findings, the policy recommendations from an EU perspective and for the Turkish as well. And finally, maybe also a few recommendations in relation to the contextual situation of the elections and the progress report, which is due out quite soon probably. I'll give the floor to Zerrin Cengiz.
Thank you very much for being here today. We would like to start with a little bit of background information on Turkey-EU relations. As most of you know here, it will be very brief, but we would just want to remind you how the course of the relations developed over the years. Turkey-EU relations started with Turkey's application to the European Economic Community in 1959. Which was then followed by other developments such as the signing of the Ankara Association Agreement in 1963 and then the signing of the additional protocol in 1970, 7 years later. Throughout the time, Turkey aligned itself towards EU membership or European Economic Community membership. And one of the developments which was significant and fundamental along the way was the completion of the customs union in 1996, which was then followed by another very important political turning point when the European Council gave Turkey the status of a candidate country in the Helsinki Summit in 1999. There is, however, the accession negotiations between Turkey and EU started officially in 2015, which started with the screening process, and that is the process through which Turkey is expected to adopt and implement a considerable part of the EU legislation, the EU acquis, which is divided into 35 chapters. Currently, due to the political developments on the side of the EU and the political developments on the side of Turkey, 17 chapters are currently blocked by several EU actors, the EU Council, some other member countries, which creates a procedural deadlock in the relations at the moment. However, although in addition to this procedural deadlock, as my colleague Mr. Westerby briefly mentioned, there is this perception at the European level that Turkey is not a very popular candidate country, and most discussion is centered upon Turkey's the fact that Turkey is a Muslim country. There has been several studies and yearly studies, surveys such as the Eurobarometer, indicating that Turkey is in fact a very unpopular country. Just below 50% of the EU public is supporting Turkey's accession to the EU, and what lies at the heart of this discussion happens to be the fact that Turkey is a Muslim country. Even though there is a relatively negative public opinion regarding Turkey's membership to the European Union, it is very important to measure how much this negative attitude is shared by the European lawmakers. It can be argued that the public opinion can change throughout time. However, the political elite's views are generally more difficult to change, and more importantly, they shape to a great extent the views of the public and of the public discussion and discourse. Therefore, we believe that our study fills a very significant gap in the literature by focusing on the possible discrimination against Turkey's accession into the EU from the perspective of the legislators in member states and their decision-making patterns. It is fair to say that if such discrimination exists, it will have a strong impact on shaping the public opinion in Europe, and that would eventually make Turkey's membership more difficult. Throughout the study, we would also follow a methodology which we would like to briefly outline to you. Our study adopted a two-tiered methodological approach, which consisted of data collection on the one hand, and it is followed by the data analysis. The data collection was done through conducting semi-structured interviews with parliamentarians, both MPs and MEPs, from across the EU, to gather their opinions surrounding Turkey-EU relations. We conducted interviews at the national parliaments of Belgium, Germany, the UK and France, in addition to the European Parliament. And in total we managed to talk to 53 European parliamentarians. At the EU Parliament we talked to parliamentarians from 16 different countries and 7 political groups, and also at the national legislative bodies, we managed to talk to most of the political parties present and represented at the parliaments. This was followed by the data analysis phase conducted by TESEV and Young Friend of Turkey research team to see the extent of existence of sociocultural bias towards Turkey's EU membership. The analysis also focused on voter pressure, party positions, personal sentiments, concerns, and pro- or anti-Turkey factors by mapping out each in great detail. All the data we collected we cross-referenced all our data with the accession criteria and the methodological framework which we developed, which I will briefly mention to you in a minute. As you know, the EU accession process is clearly defined through the Copenhagen criteria of 1993, which set an explicitly objective framework for membership. These are the criteria of the countries that they need to abide by in order to be considered to become an EU member. And they include political criteria, economic criteria, and administrative and institutional capacity to effectively implement the EU acquis to their laws. However, there is also another notion which has been part of the EU accession framework since 1993, namely the absorption capacity, which is quoted directly here. It refers to the Union's capacity to absorb new members while maintaining the momentum of European integration, which in our opinion is quite vaguely defined. Whenever Turkey's accession process is on the table, issues such as Turkey's population or Turkey's size as a country becomes part of discussion, and absorption capacity, whether or not this refers to the population or the size of the country, which is not clear, which makes the concept a vague one, therefore. In order not to have a controversial framework, because we believe that absorption capacity could be stretched out to include some of the things, and even it could be argued that it could also be used to strengthen sociocultural bias. However, in order not to have a controversial framework, we defined sociocultural bias in our study with relation to ethnicity, geography, and religion, none of which are referred to in either the accession criteria, the EU acquis, or the absorption capacity cannot be stretched out to include any of these factors.
So, to the key findings of the report. So we had a kind of a binary question, let's say, just to give you an idea of how this actually worked in practice. When we met with the parliamentarians, we would interview them, so it's kind of a semi-structured interview format in which you ask them questions. Some of them are yes-no questions, others are instead with a kind of a multiple choice situation, which they can categorize different answers and so forth. So the first finding, as you can see, is pretty revealing, and it's very positive for Turkey and for the EU as well. It's that 81% of parliamentarians seem to be in favor of Turkey joining the EU. Now, what's interesting about this finding, apart from the fact or the number itself, is that it's it's a shocking finding. When I saw it myself, I found it to be much higher than what I expected. I think many others would too. And also when you compare it to popular perception, like the Eurobarometer, the Eurobarometer in general seems to suggest that the majority of the European population are not so keen on Turkish accession. But this is a much, much higher finding, much higher number, which then seems to suggest that there is a very, very different there's a very different perception, but there's also a very big gap between what the general population in Europe seems to think about Turkey and what maybe more informed, I'd even say, parliamentarians or policymakers, possibly, that's a new research on its own, seem to think about Turkey. So that's a quite important finding to bear in mind. Now, in terms of the reason why these parliamentarians suggested Turkey to be so important, because that's the second part of the binary question of yes and no, we then suggested why would you be in favor of Turkey? Well, most of them said it's a cultural bridge between East and West, economic success, which I think everyone can acknowledge is important in terms of Turkey's growth over the last decade, and also, this is really, really important in terms of EU foreign policy, the role Turkey could play as an actor in the Middle East, and I guess we spoke with these parliamentarians, so we contextualized it a little bit more. In general, the idea of what Turkey means for European foreign policy. That means neighborhood policy and so forth. So these were quite interesting findings and much more positive than what we'd imagined. So yeah. In terms of the second finding, sadly it's not as positive as the first one. I would say it's much more negative. It's a 94% percentage belief among parliamentarians, both national and European, that there is some kind of sociocultural bias, either within their rhetoric or within their perception of the European rhetoric. So that's maybe important to emphasize on. This doesn't mean that the European parliamentarians and the national parliamentarians have sociocultural bias. This means that either they have sociocultural bias or they perceive the accession process to have sociocultural bias. In terms of the different prejudice that, so we asked them the question, what kind of prejudice do you think is the most prevalent in Europe? And we gave them different options. No, actually, was it open-ended? It was open-ended, sorry. So we didn't give them any options. It's an open-ended question, so they could kind of tell us what they believed to be the number one prejudice among Europeans. And as you can see, 35 answers go for religion, 11 answers go for cultural, and then some of the other ones, I don't know if you can see them up here, but size of population is 4, and so forth. Some of them don't rank as sociocultural prejudice, because in our definition we only put sociocultural prejudice as something like religion or culture and so forth. But nonetheless, the simple fact that there's 35 and 11 answers within that category seems to suggest that there is a very, very strong bias on the European side. So that was obviously an important finding, which was quite revealing.
Through our research, we also wanted to show the personal prejudice expressed by the parliamentarians themselves. And this is another very interesting and unexpected research finding. But throughout our research, only 6% of the participants, and that corresponds to 3 participants in total, made statements which could be categorized as prejudice according to our framework when it comes to Turkey's prospective EU membership. And we should also mention that no parliamentarian brought religion or ethnicity forward as a factor that should be discussed within the accession negotiations. However, all 3 participants referred to geographical reasons, namely the notion that Turkey is not geographically European in their arguments. Of course, whether geographical Europeanness has cultural connotations as well is open to discussion. However, within our framework, we consider geographical reasons also as sociocultural prejudice, because Turkey is officially a candidate country, which reinforces the idea that Turkey is geographically European. What this figure is actually shows us, and what is very significant about it, is that it demonstrates the difference between what the interviewed parliamentarians think about the European public in terms of the existence of sociocultural bias and their own personal positions. As my colleague mentioned, that 94% of the participants believe that there are indeed sociocultural biases in the society, whereas only 6% of them have expressed similar biases themselves. We also devoted a chapter in our study on what influences the parliamentarians' positions on Turkey. As understanding legislative behavior is crucial to analyze policy outcomes in the EU, we asked them a couple of questions about voter pressure, their party positions, so on and so forth. As you can see here, 58 of the interviewed parliamentarians stated that their parties have a pro-Turkey accession position for Turkey's membership. 19% of them said that the parties they belong to are anti-accession, and the rest, the other breakdown could be seen here. And, you know, Euroscepticism, neutral, no official party line, no remarks, so on and so forth, because we talked to a lot of different political groups at the European Parliament, which you can see here how it turns into data. It should be noted that that while there may seem to be a direct correspondence between the 19% segment here who expressed that their parties have an anti-Turkish accession stance, and the 19% who said that they don't support Turkey's accession process. Well, it seems like there's a direct correspondence, but there isn't. We should emphasize that among this 19% whose parties are anti-accession, there are parliamentarians who support Turkey's accession to the EU personally. Also, we believe that our findings verify or support the widespread notion that Turkey's EU membership is less popular among the right-wing political parties in Europe. 9 out of 10 participants who said that their parties have an anti-Turkey accession stance are members of parties at the right of the political spectrum, so to speak. We also asked the parliamentarians whether or not their party positions affected their decisions about Turkey. As you can see here, 47% made no concrete remarks, and 40% said no, and only 13% indicated that their parties have an influence on their decisions when it comes to Turkey-related matters. Although this 47% could be attributed to several reasons, such as the reluctance on the part of the parliamentarians to talk about party pressure, or the lack of tangible experience, we believe that our analysis point out to a different direction when other data is taken into account. 25 participants who made no concrete remarks about Turkey, about the influence of their parties, 18 of them, a very significant majority of them, said that they're also pro-Turkey personally, and their parties were also pro-Turkey. So we believe that this 47% who made no concrete remarks actually shows us that these parliamentarians did not need to express the parallel between their own positions and the one of their parties. However, what is very important about this figure is that 40% of the parliamentarians basically indicated that their parties did not have an effect on their decision when it comes to Turkey-related matters. And here we would like to show you the party affiliation of those parliamentarians. I don't know if you can see, but most of them are from pro-Turkey parties, and the second one is from anti-Turkey accession parties. And this is the party breakdown of the participants who didn't feel pressure from their political parties when it comes to Turkey-related issues. Finally, we asked the parliamentarians whether or not the voters or the public, their constituents, had an effect on their decisions about vis-a-vis Turkey. And it is, as you can see here, a significant figure, almost half, 49% of the participants stated that neither the voters nor the public had an effect on their decisions vis-a-vis Turkey, and only 13% addressed that they were fully or partially influenced by the public. This is another very important and also a little bit of a shocking finding, because there has been numerous studies which have revealed or at least addressed that voter pressure has had and still has a very important impact on how politicians formulate their behavior and ideas that they express in the political arena. The general findings of such research are that even a small change in the public opinion matters significantly in the voting behavior of the parliamentarians. However, the parliamentarians that we spoke to, almost half of them indicated that the voters, they were not influenced by the voters or the public in their decisions about Turkey. Of course, it doesn't mean that they would give the same answer if the question was about not Turkey relations but something else. But this is the result that we received through our research. Our final chapter is devoted to the major concerns expressed by the parliamentarians about Turkey-EU relations. During the course of the interviews, we did not directly ask the parliamentarians whether or not they believe they would like to express any concerns that they thought were hindering EU-Turkey relations. However, a significant portion of them, 43 parliamentarians out of the 53 that we talked to, expressed their opinions about such issues. Since we used the semi-structured interview methodology, it gave the opportunity to these parliamentarians to express issues that they deemed important, and this was actually the main issue that came up without being asked. Here you can see the issues that were mentioned during the course of the interviews. The numbers correspond to how many times these issues have been brought up during the interviews. As you can see, freedoms, personal freedoms, freedom of expression, freedom of press, fundamental rights, democracy, Kurdish issue, political developments in Turkey, so on and so forth, have come out rather frequently, and it should be stressed that parliamentarians always contextualized their reasoning while they were mentioning these issues within the framework of what they believed was restraining EU-Turkey relations over the previous years, as relations have been in a stagnation since 2006. We are very much aware that these categories are not mutually exclusive, and they could be bundled together in several ways. However, we wanted to show as we were presented through the interviews so that it could be clear and more visible to the audience. In light of our research and the report, we developed some policy recommendations for both Turkey and EU sides. We believe that one of the most important findings of this research is regarding the sociocultural bias, the existence of it, as 94% of the participants stated that they believe there is sociocultural bias, whereas they don't seem to be that biased themselves. We believe that there is a lack of communication and a need for public diplomacy to inform the European public about this, and to at least inform them about the accession process and to address how to decrease these issues which are not part of the EU accession process at all, which also goes hand in hand with promoting domestic and international benefits of Turkey's accession into the EU. When it comes to Turkey's accession process, religion is on the table very frequently, population, etc. But it is very important to put Turkey's accession process in the context of security, energy, the refugee problem, strengthening EU foreign policy and neighborhood policy, which would change the discourse and would actually be very beneficial for Turkey's image at the European side, which also is related to Turkey's prominence in the Middle East and how that could be benefited from in EU neighborhood policy. It is very important that to acknowledge that Turkey's accession would contribute to EU's domestic ethnic stability and actually diminish EU's so-called image of a Christian club, and would also make, we believe that it would also make EU a more reliable international actor in the Muslim world. Relatedly, European legislators should address the parallel between the increasing Islamophobia and xenophobia in Europe, which is repeatedly mentioned in reports and studies, and the sociocultural prejudices, most important of which is the fact that Turkey is a Muslim country, against Turkey's EU membership. And relatedly, efforts to reduce discrimination against Muslims in Europe should be a priority in addition to promoting the cultural diversity of the European Union, which is one of the benchmarks of the Union. At a more policy level, we believe that the closed chapters should be opened in order to encourage Turkey to undertake the major reforms necessary for full membership and necessary for mentioned problems as expressed by the MPs themselves. And we also believe that absorption capacity, which is quite a vaguely defined notion, should be clearly formulated and should be clearly presented when it comes to the accession talks.
So in terms of recommendations for Turkey, there's obviously there's several things that should probably be done. Turkey should be more active and visible on in terms of major EU countries as well as Brussels in order to better explain the complex domestic political developments and reach out more efficiently to European policymakers. There's also the fact that parties need to develop a clear and determined agenda with regards to membership. Turkey should boost the reform process, meaning all the different chapters of the acquis and the harmonization, and it should also engage closely with leading European political parties, noticeably the ones probably on the far right or on the centre right, which our report seems to suggest are the ones that are keenly anti-Turkish. So that would be a strong benefit. And also there's a degree of advocacy process which seems to be lacking on the Turkish side, which could also be improved. So these are some important ones. I mean, of course, the negative outlook in terms of freedom of press, rights, democracy, the list that came up are major concerns for European parliamentarians and need to be taken seriously. There also has to be more policies that repair its image internationally and show commitment to the accession process. As Zeren mentioned before, some of these requirements would, for example, being more upfront and maybe pushing for the opening of all the different chapters, maybe making this more of a public statement as well. There are also some added recommendations which are quite important. First, one thing we didn't really mention before is the fact that, so we did mention what the European parliamentarians repeatedly had concerns about. One thing that didn't come up, which at least surprised me personally, and I think the whole research team quite a bit, was that when asked about Turkish accession into the EU, there was a long list of reasons for why Turkey couldn't enter and so forth, as we discussed before. But one thing that never seemed to come up, which stunned me, was the fact that, that certain chapters are blocked. So the political blockage of chapters by, for example, France and Cyprus didn't really seem to be on the top of the agenda for many of the parliamentarians, which surprised me personally because I definitely saw that as a disincentive for Turkey in terms of the accession process. So I think that was, it wasn't a direct or an active finding, but an inactive finding in the sense that it wasn't being mentioned, which was quite surprising. It was also, I guess, some added recommendations which contextualize the current climate of elections, include the fact that at the current moment there is a single-party government, which has been elected by a large majority of the Turkish population. At the same time, there is also a refugee crisis going on, which, considering that 81% of parliamentarians seem to suggest that they are favourable towards Turkey, this might be an interesting climate to start picking out specific member countries in the European Union, like, for example, notoriously more pro-Turkish countries like Sweden, Italy, the UK, all of which have their independent reasons to be more pro-Turkish, to then maybe relaunch some negotiations and try to regain momentum of the process. I think on the other side, so that's more on the European side. On the other side, I think it's also very much up to Turkey now to advocate and also to speak about the fact that there is this sociocultural prejudice, that this should be tackled, and that they should then also actively reach out to European countries with these kind of circumstances. So these are some of the contextual reasons for the recommendations.
Thank you so much. Maybe a big applause for the team, the presentation. Myself, I'm very happy that we could gather together so many different information, and I'm looking forward to your questions as well. Please feel free to ask. I'll give you some more time by asking a question to my right, Mr. Filos. Hearing the question, what European legislators think of Turkey, what would have been your personal view on that beforehand, and maybe the changes or the findings compared to your views? Maybe we can have some comments on that. Please be prepared for questions later. Looking forward to that.
Thank you very much. Indeed, a lot of information to digest. I will have a number of observations, if you allow me, and please forgive me if I move a little bit outside of the context of the report. Sensu stricto recommendations correspond very much to the questionnaire and the issues that were studied, but I will allow myself to argue with, or perhaps not to argue, because I think that recommendations are correct in its logic, but I would add a few more perhaps. But just to address a few issues that regularly come back on during discussions about the future membership of Turkey in the EU. Now, first observation, why policymakers are much more in favor of Turkish membership in the EU than the voters or electorate. It's first and foremost, I think it was partially explained, because politicians, they tend to think more about interest-driven agenda, and I think part of the recommendations was focused on that, where Turkey can rebuild its reputation by engaging in a number of issues, including migration, energy security, foreign policy, etc. This is very much the approach of the politicians, but not necessarily of the society. It's true that there is the issue of social cultural bias, which needs to be addressed, but I would tend to suggest that this social cultural bias cannot be addressed efficiently by public diplomacy. This is only, I would say, 5% of the efforts that are needed. In order to address this social cultural bias, a number of issues have to be properly understood First, you have to make proper assumptions, and then to conduct proper policy. But it's not only about policy. I think that there's a huge role to be played by Turkish diaspora living in European countries, because they are shaping very much the perception of Turkey in Europe. And there are millions of your compatriots living in European countries. I think that visa liberalization is one of the tools that will definitely help to improve the image of the Turkish society in Europe, because I expect myself that there will be thousands or perhaps millions of Turkish citizens visiting European countries, showing interest in Europe, visiting musea, galleries, etc. I think that Turks have to be seen in Europe as a nation that shows interest and wants to contribute to the integrated Europe. When the simple concept of enlargement of the club, and I come myself from the country that joined the NATO first in 1998, and then EU in 2004. I'm from Poland, and so based on experience of my home country, the issue of in NATO context of security provider or security recipient was one of the concepts discussed when NATO was expanding eastwards, and I think it's still a very valid concept. And of course, Turkey is security provider inside NATO, no doubt about that. It's the second army in NATO and a very strong country in military and security terms. But then in the context of the EU, the issue is much more complex, and it is, I would say, but I'm improvising now, and this is not EU line, it's just my personal observations, it's problems or solutions provider or recipient. Now, in order to be seen as a welcome contributor to the EU club, I think that the perception needs to be shaped around these issues, where Turkey will contribute to the EU. And the issues that I think MEPs mentioned as those that are complicating the Turkish membership, starting with fundamental freedoms, human rights, democracy, Kurdish issue. These are the issues that I think this is the values agenda, and I would tend that interest agenda has to be completed, or even has to be preceded by the values-based agenda. Values-based agenda will open the way to the Turkish membership in the EU much faster than interest-based agenda. Interest, we have energy security was mentioned. We have energy partnership with Russia, which I think started in around 60s with first big agreement with Italy. And even today, when we have de facto Cold War between West and Russia, we keep saying that Russia has been reliable partner for Western Europe, let me clarify, in energy terms. But it doesn't mean that Russia will open the doors for the European integration for itself because of the interest-driven agenda. So I would say that values-based agenda is much more sustainable and much more convincing in the end for the European society. Last thing I have to mention about Christian club, because this is something that is coming back to discussions, and I think this is one of the social cultural bias that has to be addressed, but we have to be frank about it. As you know, the Muslim population inside the EU is growing. 7% of French population is Muslim. I think 5% of German population is Muslim, and 4% of British population is Muslim. But then look at the numbers of mosques in London only. In London there are 414 mosques. In Moscow, I mentioned Russia before, it's an interesting comparison because your President Erdogan participated recently in the ceremony of opening of the gigantic mosque in Moscow. There are 2 million Muslims living in Moscow, but there are only 4 mosques. this will tell you a lot about the West, how West is Islamophobic. Not. It is not Islamophobic, as refugees escaping from Syria and Iraq are heading towards this Christian club Europe. They are not heading towards Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia or Iran or many other Muslim countries. They are running towards the West, the Christian club Europe. I think that migration is one of the issues that, of course, will continue dominating the EU-Turkey agenda, and it will be a sort of test case also for interest-driven agenda, to what extent Turkey will be in a position to work together with Europe to solve the issue, not to stop the flow of refugees, because this is not the lasting solution. We need a much more complex solution to that crisis. But then, as I mentioned, not only public diplomacy, but EU agenda must be closer to the center of public debate in Turkey. So the much more important for the Turks is to bring EU agenda to the center of public debate in Turkey, to make reforms in Turkey very much related to the European agenda, European values-based agenda. And this is the most convincing platform to convince the European voters. Politicians, as I mentioned, and it was discovered in the study, are more or less convinced that Turkey has a lot to offer for the interest-driven agenda. But the societies will not necessarily follow, in this case, the politicians, and Turkey must do much more on values-based agenda. These are the comments that I would like to share. Much more than I wanted to say, but it's been already far too long. Thank you.
To my left, do we have comments on that?
Yeah, maybe I'll just briefly comment on a few of these remarks as well, and then we'll open the floor to question and answers. Just in terms of when you mentioned about public diplomacy and sociocultural bias, I think it might be true that public diplomacy is only part of the remedy, let's say, in the European Union. But what's interesting is maybe to look at the study again, and what I realized, and this is to some degree speculative, is that out of the people who were interviewed in the study, there were a lot of people who seemed to suggest that there was an anti-European sentiment and that bias couldn't be overrun so easily. Well, maybe the European average voter just doesn't actually care about Turkey that much. I mean, I know it sounds wrong to say it like that, but it's actually not. I mean, if you look at the average voter in Turkey or in the US or in England or anywhere else, their top priorities usually are the economy and, domestic security concerns and so forth. Maybe Turkey simply isn't that high on the agenda, which kind of rephrases the question in terms of, okay, of course we need to focus on public diplomacy, but maybe it is, the ball is back in the court of the parliamentarians, of the officials, of the European leaders and so forth. Maybe it's them who should be leading the way, I would argue, to some degree. The comment on the Turkish diaspora, I think you're 100% correct, absolutely. Whether you go anywhere in the world, when you have a group of representatives there, they're the easiest way to show a good image and, to show that Turkey is, it's a great country and so forth, and a country that you'd want to be in an alliance with. And in that case, it's very difficult to tell people how they should act and behave and so forth. But I think an interesting thing to look at the Turkish diaspora is the fact that they haven't, at least a lot of parliamentarians in France mentioned this, they haven't been very good at creating advocacy groups. Right? So there are other minority groups, noticeably in France, of course, which have been much, much more effective at that. So that's something that I guess something that should be reflected upon a lot more. On your remarks about value-based agenda versus interest-based agenda, I'm the first one to say that the line of value-based, I suppose you also mean democracy and human rights and all these kind of things. So we see these things, and they're extremely important. I'm the first one to say that. But I also have to say that in the accession process, there is a lot, at least from my perspective, of interest-based agenda going on as well from the European perspective. And sometimes it feels like it might be a minority of countries in the European Union who seem to be dictating interest-based agendas that are overshadowing some of these value-based agendas. So I think it's a two-sided process. You can't only accuse Turkey of not being value-based. You must also remember that there are specific countries in the European Union. These do not account for all European countries at all. On the contrary, they're probably a small minority, but simply prioritize an anti-Turkish stance, which is interest-based, and I think that's problematic. In terms of the EU agenda being at the center in Turkey, that's obviously true. Turkey is the one who's the candidate country, so they should be extremely proactive. But in terms of, again, it takes two to tango. I mean, it's very important that we don't alienate the Turks, precisely for some of the value-based reasons, but also I have to be maybe a little bit more cynical for some of the interest-based reasons as well. I mean, we are talking about an increasingly polarized European neighborhood, which is facing terrorism on a constant basis, something which I think is a 100% shared concern by Turkey and the EU. And without some goodwill on the EU side, it's easy to alienate a candidate country as well, which would be a big mistake.
Samuel, thank you so much for your comments on that. Now we're open for the audience, and you can feel free to ask questions in English, Turkish, thanks to the translation team who have been actively translating back there. Feel free. Waiting your questions. First question here. Microphone is coming.
Ben öncelikli olarak şunu söylemek istiyorum.
İsim ve kurum alabilir miyiz?
Yaşar Batuhan Güran, Hukuk Uluslararası Bölümü öğrencisiyim TOBB ETÜ'de. Şunu söylemek istiyorum. Türkiye'de özellikle 1959'dan beri Avrupa Birliği olan yaşanan süreçte halkın Avrupa Birliği'ne katılma yönelik desteği söz konusuydu. Fakat özellikle 1990'lı yılların sonunda ve özellikle 2006 yılından beri bu ilginin azaldığı görülüyor. Son dönemde kamuoyu yoklamalarına bakıldığında da özellikle Türkiye'de gerek genç nesilde gerekse de yaşlı nüfusta Avrupa Birliği'ne karşı olan ilgi azalmaya başladı. Bence bunda hem Türkiye'nin yapmış olduğu hataların hem de Avrupa Birliği'nin yapmış olduğu hataların katkı payı var ama şöyle bir şey söylemek istiyorum. Avrupa Birliği Türkiye'ye şöyle bir algı yarattı. Yani Türkiye bütün süreçleri tamamlasa da Avrupa Birliği'nin tüm istediği şeyleri de yerine getirse de sanki Türkiye sanki Avrupa Birliği'ne alınmayacak gibi bir algı var. Ve bu da Türk insanının Avrupa Birliği'ne karşı olan ilgisini azalttığını düşünüyorum. Özellikle 2006 yılından beri süreç durma noktasına geldi. Şunun da çok büyük etkisi var. Halkın Avrupa Birliği'ne karşı olan desteğinin azalması. Bunda da bence en büyük hata Avrupa Birliği'ne ait. Çünkü özellikle Avrupa Birliği Türkiye'ye olan karşı ön yargılarıyla ve gerek yorumlarıyla, gerek hazır açıkladığı raporlarla bunu göstermeye çalışıyor. Ve Avrupa Birliği Türkiye'ye karşı açık bir ön yargısının olduğu da açık. Bu kültürel olarak da, sosyal olarak da, toplumsal olarak da, dinsel olarak da bir gerçek. Şunu söylemek istiyorum ki Avrupa Birliği tek başına bir toplum yaratmak, tek bir millet haline getirmek istiyor galiba Avrupa'yı. Fakat Türkiye kültürel bir farklılık katabilir, kültürel bir zenginlik ekleyebilir Avrupa Birliği'ne ama Avrupa Birliği genel bunu değerlendirmiyor bence. Ben Avrupa Birliği neden böyle politika takip ettiğini merak ediyorum. Yani Türkiye'nin Avrupa Birliği'ne çok ekonomik yönde, kültürel yönde katkılar olabileceğini düşünüyorum fakat Avrupa Birliği'nin bu politikasının temel amacını merak ediyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
So I think unity and diversity is quite an interesting topic there. Do you want to comment on that quickly?
Right. Now, very briefly, I think there's no project of creation one EU nation. We are diverse and we will continue being diverse, and in that sense there's a place for Turkey in the diverse European Union. And mind you that I mentioned the Muslim community, which is growing, steadily growing in the EU, and these are citizens of the European Union. But we have also other candidate countries with strong Muslim population, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Albania, Kosovo, in Macedonia as well. Almost half of the society is Albanian, as you know. This is not the third point that the EU is closing itself for Turkey because Turkey is different, is Muslim, or sometimes I hear also because Turkey is big. Well, we have also other big countries in the EU, and I remember when Poland was joining to the EU, there were also some fears that, oh, with these smaller candidate countries it's easy, but with bigger like Poland it's more difficult. But we made it through the EU, and I think that no one thinks in those terms anymore. Prejudices, we were discussing about that. I think it's shared responsibility to address those prejudices, and I think that a bigger role is for Turkish society, for your leadership. I'm afraid that I don't see much information policy about European integration in Turkey. And this is normally for each candidate country, this is the primary responsibility of each government to inform its society about European integration. I don't see it. And tell me when such policy was conducted in Turkey last time. I don't think that in last years this was the case. So the Turkish society has to be well informed about European integration, what European integration means for each of you, and then this must be complemented by interest-driven agenda for sure, by public diplomacy, because we need to have support on both sides, support of European societies, but also we need to have convincing support of Turkish society, and pressure coming from Turkish society towards your leaders, towards your own parliamentarians, your politicians, your media, to work on European agenda on every day for the benefit of Turkish society in the end. You are not doing this to satisfy anyone in the EU. This is the agenda that will satisfy in the end first and foremost Turkish society. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the core question in that range of questions that you asked was, okay, there's less interest in Europe, in Turkey, true, but I think that the main question was, if we close all the chapters, will we not get in anyway? That's what I felt, right? And that's the core of it. And I think the honest answer to that is you do. I mean, I think if Turkey finishes all the chapters, it does get into the EU. But the question is, can it get that far? So it's a process, right? And I think politics isn't so easy, I think, in the first place. So this process, first of all, consists of 28 member countries on the EU side. And then it also consists of Turkey, which seems to have a kind of a mixture of different ambitions in the region. Sometimes it looks more to the east, sometimes it looks more to the west. This kind of depends on the politics of the day sometimes. And from the EU perspective, I think this process, as I mentioned before, and as we also try to look at in the report, isn't as technical and depoliticized as it probably should be. And what does that mean? It means that there should be more efforts from Turkey and the EU members, and more specifically, and I can only repeat what I said before because I really think that this is core to Turkish membership, and it answers your question. If certain member countries in the EU, noticeably Sweden, Italy, that has some ambitions of a Euro-Mediterranean partnership, Sweden, that has a lot of focus on refugees these days, the UK, that's a country that values Turkey greatly because it believes in a shared European neighbourhood policy, and it puts a lot of emphasis on things like shared security, foreign policy, defence. These are really, again, things where Turkey and the EU have a lot in common. And so I think if certain countries within the EU would carry their weight more and push more for some of these kind of things, then you'd have a very different outcome. And then I think the accession chapters and things like the blockage of Cyprus and so forth might become less relevant over time. But again, it's a long process, and it takes two to tango. I have to also agree with Mr. Fidos on the fact that it doesn't help that the progress report every year seems to suggest that Turkey has some internal issues, right, on the questions we mentioned before, including democracy and so forth. So again, I mean, if people came together and properly tried to cooperate on these things, and specific member countries in the EU made a bigger effort, then it would look quite different.
Thank you so much. Questions? Here.
here and then go there.
Merhaba, ben Kaan ve Uluslararası İlişkiler Öğrencisiyim TOBB ETÜ'de. İki sorum olacaktı. Birincisi Suriye meselesiyle ilgili ve mültecilerle ilgili. İkincisi de Güney Kıbrıs meselesiyle ilgili. Birinci sorumda Suriyeli mültecilerin Avrupa Birliği neden sorumluluğundan kaçıyor? Yani görüyoruz haberlerde Macaristan'dan yani sürekli ülkeler arasında, Avrupa Birliği ülkeleri arasında gidiyorlar ve hala bir çözüm bulunamadı. Ve yani ben gördüğümde kendi açımdan sorumluluğundan kaçtığını düşünüyorum Avrupa Birliği'nin. Ki Türkiye'nin 2 milyon mülteciye bakarken ülke kaynaklarının çoğunu ayırdığını da düşünürsek. İkinci sorum da Güney Kıbrıs meselesiyle ilgili. Avrupa Birliği neden Güney Kıbrıs'ı üyeliğe kabul ediyor? Kıbrıs meselesi çözülmeden önce. Bunu da yanıtlayabilirseniz sevinirim.
Interesting topics, Sofias. Popular topics as well.
The toughest questions for me. Now, on Syrian refugees, there are some myths about how Europe is handling this issue. It is true that Turkey has been hosting a huge number of refugees, and there's full recognition for Turkish generosity, for Turkish humanitarian approach for hosting and helping the refugees. And this is not the first wave in recent history of Turkey of refugees coming to this country. So Turkey has also some rich experience from last decades in hosting different refugee communities. There's full recognition for that. Now, Europe is also the, let's say, club of countries that have rich history in different migration waves. Out of Europe, into Europe, and if you look into the number of non-European EU, originating from non-European countries, citizens of Europe, you will see that Europe is also welcoming, and even now it is welcoming, despite all the controversies, it is welcoming Syrian refugees on its soil. Now the question is how to organize ourselves, and it was mentioned before, 28 countries with different cultures, with different experiences in dealing with refugees. So it is not an easy issue to be decided just like that. It's much easier for a single country like Turkey to take decisions and to organize itself. For 28 countries, this doesn't come that easy, also because this rapid increase of numbers of refugees from Syria surprised Europeans. It was unexpected. And mind you, during only 2 months of September and October, I think over 500,000 of refugees came to the EU. This is something that is, of course, difficult to handle within days and weeks, but look what kind of mobilization you see on the EU side, that the EU leaders are meeting every 2 weeks to move agenda forward, to try to find the best possible solutions and mechanisms to handle this issue, to take the most proper care of those people that are coming in need. Some of them are economic migrants, and this is well kept secret. These are not only refugees escaping from war-torn areas. There are some of them also are economic migrants. The issue is how to distinguish between one group and another, and there are plenty of practical questions that need to be addressed. But I'm confident that Europe, once the machinery of decision-making process is launched, we will come to the best possible solutions, and we will address these issues. Coming back to the other question about what is at the end of accession talks with Turkey. Again, I will repeat myself. Once the machinery is activated, it will not stop unless, of course, Turkey makes us to stop this process. But if Turkey doesn't make any move to make us stop this machinery, this process, I think we'll end up at membership of Turkey in the EU. it has never been the case that the EU was not consistent. Decisions matter in the EU, and we committed ourselves to be in this process until the end. And Turkey has a chance to become a member of the EU. Now, how fast this will happen, it depends mostly on Turkey, and to some extent also on the EU. The second question, Southern Cyprus. I mean, I don't have any satisfactory reply to that. The assumption was, of course, the intentions were positive. The assumption was that once we make Cyprus member of the EU, we will find a solution soon after. But 11 years have passed and we're still not there. But I want to be optimistic also because we've never been probably that close to the solution, and negotiations are ongoing very intensively, and we are hopeful that next year we will solve the issue of Cyprus, which will unblock also to some extent at least the accession process with Turkey. Thank you.
I'll just make a very brief comment on Cyprus. I think you have to simply read international law and maybe look at the Annan plan and why it failed. I think it's a top priority for sure, and definitely without a resolution to the Cyprus issue, I can't even imagine Turkish membership to the EU, so that's a no-brainer as far as I'm concerned. For them, and also on that topic, I think the ball is definitely in the court of the EU, considering, again, the Annan plan. Have a look at that. As far as I'm concerned for the Syrian refugees, I think I really agree with you on the fact that the EU has made a massive effort. They were very, very slow to start, but both on a governmental level, but also on and I think it's even more interesting, on a non-governmental level. If you look at the citizens' initiatives across the European Union, from Stockholm to Berlin down to Athens, it was quite impressive what happened in terms of helping, facilitating, creating makeshift refugee camps in cities and so forth. However, of course, some blame is then allocated to some European governments for not properly assisting these refugees and creating proper camps for them. But I think that will come, and I think a lot of money has been allocated on the EU side, or at least on member states level. Of course, it's not the same thing as what Turkey's done. According to the UN, Turkey has pretty much the best standard refugee camps in the world. Afad has done an excellent job. I've visited them myself several times over the last few months. And they're very good standards, so that's also a no-brainer. But maybe to answer your question, why hasn't Europe done this to the same degree as Turkey? Well, I think Europe probably has a slightly different foreign policy in the region. That's a very big difference. Number two, they're not the same proximity. So I mean, Turkey is on the border with Syria. Of course, they have to take a proactive approach. The UK isn't, right? So that explains a lot of that as well. And then, as you mentioned as well, the fact that the EU is a big machinery and it takes a lot of time. So these things go slow.
Was over there. Wonderful.
Merhaba, Neslişen Baykal'da Uluslararası İlişkiler öğrencisiyim ben de. Daha çok araştırmayla ilgili bir soru soracağım. Bilmiyorum bu konuyla ilgili konuştunuz mu ama parlamenterler genel olarak Türkiye'nin ve Bulgaristan'ın üyelik sürecini hiç karşılaştırıyor ya da diğer üye ülkelerin ya da aday ülkelerin üyeliğini karşılaştırıyorlar mı? Bunu sormak istiyorum. Çünkü Türkiye'de bence böyle bir karşılaştırma mevcut. Onlar bununla ilgili ne düşünüyorlar? Bir de genel olarak üyeliğe umutlu mu yaklaşıyorlar yoksa daha çok uğraşmaları gerek Türkiye'nin diye bir yaklaşım mı var? Evet, olumlu yaklaşımlar var dediniz genel olarak ama yine de olumluyla umutlunun arasında bir fark olduğunu düşünüyorum. Yani umutları var mı? Bir de parlamenterler karar verirken genel olarak yani duygularla mı hareket ettiler yoksa daha çok profesyonel olarak mı yaklaştılar? Bunları öğrenmek istiyorum. Teşekkür ederim.
Araştırmanın
süresi boyunca yani spesifik olarak eğildiğimiz bir şey değildi. Türkiye'nin AB üyeliği süreci ve diğer ülkeler. Genel olarak Türkiye, Hırvatistan örneğiyle karşılaştırılıyor süreçler aynı zamanda başladığından dolayı. Ama bir bulgu haline getirilebilecek bir çıktı bu konuda alamadık. Bulgaristan ya da başka bir şey, yani özellikle de eğilmediğimiz için. Ama zaten yani genel olarak şu anki kontekste koyduğunuz zaman fasılların kapalı olması durumu ortada. Yani zaten diğer süreçlerden çok daha farklı bir işleyiş içerisinde olduğu sürecin ortada. Bunu parlamenterler özellikle dile getirmediler. Ama hani genel olarak bir karşılaştırmalı perspektiften bakıldığı zaman süreçlerin farklı işliyor olduğu görülebilir. Bunun daha farklı sebepleri de olabilir. Yani müktesebatın uygulanması sürecinin Türkiye'de daha kompleks ve uzun zaman aldığı, bunlar da argümanlar arasındadır. Ama genel olarak şu anki prosedürel sıkıntı noktasına bakıldığı zaman zaten diğer süreçlerden daha farklı bir şey izliyor. İkinci sorunuz umutlu olup olmadıklarıyla alakalıydı galiba. Açıkçası benim araştırmacı olarak genel olarak izlenimim umutlu oldukları yönünde diyebilirim. Bu da tabii yani bir ölçülebilir bir çıktı olarak ortaya koyulabilecek bir şey değil tabii ki akademik bir çalışmada. Ama genel olarak çok umutsuz bir tablo dile getirilmedi. En azından onu söyleyebilirim. Öyle bir çıktı, yani izlenim olarak ben açıkçası ortaya çıktı diyemem, umutsuz çıktı diyemem. Ama dediğim gibi yani çıktı olarak, sayısal olarak ya da istatistiki olarak ortaya koyulabilecek bir şey değil. Variable değil umut bizim şeyimiz içerisinde. Dolayısıyla çok net bir şey söylemek de mümkün değil. Son sorunuza da bakarsak, kişisel mantık mı yoksa biraz daha kişisel duruşlarıyla mı? Aslında bunların hepsinin bir kombinasyon olarak düşünebiliriz. Tabii konuştuğumuz kişilerin bunu mantığıyla mı, hissiyatıyla mı cevapladığını bilmek gene de mümkün değil. Ama tabii ki bazı parlamenterler özellikle Türkiye ile ilgili kişisel bağlarını vurguladılar bizimle konuşurken. Sadece Türkiye kökenli olmak gibi değil. İşte Türkiye'de arkadaşları olmak, bağlantıları olmak, bunları genellikle özellikle bu bahsetmiş oldukları sıkıntılar, işte basın özgürlüğü, demokratikleşme vesaire gibi konular dile getirildiğinde bir hayal kırıklığı gibi bir izlenim aldık biz. Yani Türkiye böyle olmamalıydı gibi bir izlenim aldığımızı söyleyebilirim. O konular o şekilde dile getirilirken tabii ki Türkiye ile olan gönül bağları vesaire devreye girmiştir. Ama tabii ki sorulara cevap verme şeyinde tam olarak bilemiyorum. Ama böyle yüksek bir şeyin çıkması tabii sadece Türkiye ile gönül bağı ile ilgili açıklanabilecek bir şey değil. Aslında parlamenterlerin objektif olarak Türkiye'nin üyeliğine ne kadar sıcak baktığını gösteriyor diye düşünüyorum.
Bir soru daha vardı. Hocam sıralamıştık ama izninizle.
Hi, my name is Kasım. I would like to ask my question in English because our teacher gives our lectures in English. As a respect to that, I would like to speak in English. And so mine is going to be more a comment than a question, but we have seen that we are more skeptical than before. Just at the morning class we have seen today, we have discussed that it was a Turkish foreign policy class, and we have discussed that before people really were enthusiastic about EU. And for example, when the negotiations about our membership started, there were firework shows in Ankara. and I don't remember them, I was just a kid, but there were fireworks shows and there were festivals, and people really were enthusiastic about it, and the public opinion was in a hopeful way. But then we see that even in those times, even the people who said that, who defined the EU as a Christian club, even they were in favor of being a member of the European Union. But when it comes to this year we are in, when it comes to 2015, we see that even us students don't really have the hope that we will, in fact, be a member of the EU. Because we see that there are more than the cultural differences between us about this issue. We see that there are interests that are speaking, like the Southern Cyprus issue and the Armenian issue, and there are diasporas of these groups in Europe. And without solving these issues first, which we don't know how many years that will take, and we don't believe that we will be able to be a member. But still, as a Turkish student, I don't believe that we are less European than the Bulgarian or the Romanian people. So I believe that, I hope that I will be one of the people, or my children will be one of the people of the European community, and I thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much. I think the whole panel agrees on that, in fact.
Thank you very much. In fact, I wanted to tell you that you students, you are the last group in this country that should lose hope, because so much depends on you. You will be future leaders of this country, and you will be hopefully contributing to European integration of Turkey for your generation and for your children. So I think that very much depends on you. You should definitely not leave this process to the politicians only, because the role of civil societies is critical. And I would like you to see when we celebrate Europe Day, I would like to see you celebrating with us, but I would like to see you organizations that are promoting the European agenda in this country, because a lot depends on you. So these fireworks, they should still be in your heart and in your activities. That's what I wanted to say about that. Armenian Cypriot lobbies, you should not exaggerate, because there are plenty of myths that are paralyzing you. And these are some of those. The Christian club is another myth that is paralyzing you. You start believing in those and repeating those mantras without realizing that this is not the core of the problem. The core of the problem is to see the wave of Europeanization in Turkey. If you convince yourself, then Europe will be also convinced that Turkey really wants to become a member of the EU. Thank you.
Hocam, öğrencilerimizden aldık. Comment.
Thank you very much for all your presentations. In fact, we would like to increase the European agenda at the university level. We have a co-op education program, cooperative education program. In fact, at our university, we have a dual system. We have theoretical classes, as well as our students have to go to training 3 times until they graduate, and we would like the EU delegation in Ankara to be a partner institution, and I will give you our protocol and our offer. We would be happy if you can consider our proposal. And I have 2 points. One is about one of the results of the survey. You said that 49% of the parliamentarians state that they are not affected by the public opinion. I mean, isn't it an irony in itself? Because these parliamentarians are elected simply to represent the public. But they argue that they do not represent the public opinion, or at least they are not affected when it comes to Turkey's accession process. And my second question is related to your methodology. Among our students, we have our MA students as well, who are trying to write their MA thesis, and that will be helpful for their studies as well. What can you say about the representativeness of your study? I mean, you have interviewed some parliamentarians at the European Parliament. I mean, do you think that, or to what extent does it represent the average opinion at the European Parliament or at the Bundestag, at the German Parliament. You have made some interviews, and statistically, with regard to your methodology, could you please a little bit elaborate further?
With regards to your first question, it was a very interesting finding when we looked at the results, and 49% of the parliamentarians said we are not affected by the public when it comes to Turkey-related decisions. First, it's a very specific question. As I tried to briefly mention during the presentation, that this is a Turkey-specific question. And since we interviewed parliamentarians from 7 groups from 16 countries, it is sometimes the fact that from their constituents in their countries, Turkey's accession process is a non-issue. So it would be fair to say that for some parliamentarians who are pro-enlargement, pro-enlargement to Turkey, but when asked about the public that they represent, they say, okay, I mean, I do think this, but Turkey's membership is not a big issue in my constituency. And even if my constituents come up to me and say, no, I wouldn't change my idea because of these reasons. So if we had asked a question about agricultural policy, maybe 95% of the parliamentarians would say, of course we're affected. You know, it's first the question, and second, whether or not Turkey's accession is an issue. Because 16 countries is a broad sample. We wish it was 28, but still it's more than half of the countries.
I think in terms of the gap between finding something relevant for the public and a legislator is much more common than maybe you'd think. I think whether you're in Turkey or any of the EU member countries, I think there's simply certain areas, and I'm sad to say this, that EU areas tend to show less importance for the general public, whether in Turkey or in my native country or many other countries in the EU. I'm the first one to say that that should change. It would be great if there would be more Europeanism, but you also have to let things take its natural way and see how that develops. To some degree, you can't force anything down anyone's mouths and so forth. But I think a technical question of the accession of Turkey into the EU, which isn't something as dramatic as should we go to war with Iraq or not, or something like what's the tax cut you're going to get from electing this specific government. I think there's so many areas of policy that simply don't interest the majority of people because they're just not informed enough, to be perfectly honest. And I think the Turkey issue falls in that category. Again, what do we learn from that? In my opinion, we learn that it's then, of course, it's up to the general European public, but to some degree even more, it's up to the state leaders of the EU and EU member countries and parliamentarians to do something about it.
And your second question, in terms of the representativeness of the sample, as I said, we try to, first our aim was to talk to all the representatives of the countries. So we managed to get 16, and from 9 groups, out of 9 groups, and not affiliated, out of 9 groups, we managed to talk to 7. So at the European Parliament level, that was the first aim, and I consider the study quite successful in that sense. At the national legislative bodies, we also try to talk to the majority of the parties that are represented in the parliament. So, I was just taking a look. So we talked to 3 major parties in the UK, 5 parties in Belgium, 4 parties in Germany, and 4 parties in France, which is quite representative. But of course, another issue with representativeness, which I'm afraid was not that strong in our study, although we tried our best to do, is the gender equality in the study, which needs to be a priority in all the cases, in all the studies if you are dealing with a sample group. Of course, when you get in touch with people, you cannot control how many people would get back to you. And that is something that you cannot control. But I recommend that, I wish our sample had more women. I think it's around 20-22 now. I believe overall it was, the representativeness is very well balanced and managed.
Okay, we have another question over there. Microphone.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's Dr. Mustafa Kutlay, Assistant Professor of International Political Economy here at TOBB University. I would like to ask two questions. The first one is about the methodology issue. As far as I see from your appendix, I see that in Turkey you have talked to 4 parliamentarians. 3 of them are from Republican People's Party and the other one is from Nationalist Movement Party. What I wonder is that Justice and Development Party is ruling this country for over 13 years and you didn't consult to Justice and Development Party. Why didn't you do this? What was the aim here? Especially the HDP is another quite important party because it's a pro-Kurdish party and Kurdish question is quite an important issue in terms of Turkey's democratization and obviously Turkey's EU membership process. My second question is about the refugee crisis and the way in which Turkey and EU is trying to find out a solution to this problem. You all know that a joint action plan is currently being negotiated between the parties. But when we see that the European Union, rather than considering Turkey a kind of strategic partner, is trying to reduce Turkey's position as a kind of border state. What the European Union wants in the strategic action plan is to improve Turkey's legal system, to provide better education to the refugees, Syrian refugees, to integrate these people into labor market and provide a better future for these people in Turkey. And second, the European Union in the plan wants Turkey to protect its borders in a stricter way in order not to allow illegal migrants to transfer to European countries. In return, the European Union promises to provide financial aid. So this resembles the kind of relationship in EU's Mediterranean policy in the pre-Arab Spring period, and because European Union was trying a kind of policy with the authoritarian Arab regimes at that time. The European Union was providing material support and didn't criticize the legitimacy of the authoritarian leaders in these countries. In return, these leaders were protecting European borders, right? Protecting the borders so that illegal migrants, radical extremist people could not flee to European countries. So what I am trying to say, to cut a long story short, do you believe that the current spirit of the negotiations in terms of Syrian refugee crisis will lead to a kind of benign relationship between Turkey and the EU and will clarify Turkey's path towards European Union, or is going to be harmful for both EU values, for Turkey's EU membership process and for the refugees as well? And thank you very much.
I'll take the first question. First, I have to briefly stress that the analysis that we presented is solely based on the interviews that we conducted in Europe. So we talked to 4 parliamentarians, as you said, from Turkey, but we didn't include them in our analysis. Of course, we couldn't ask them the same questions because the questions are designed for the European legislators. The second issue here, and you're absolutely right, was that we got, it's not that we didn't consult them, all the parties, we got in touch with all the parties. We mainly, of course, when you are reaching out to, you know, the parliamentarians, we mainly chose them from the European accession committees and people who are dealing with foreign policy at the parliament. And we got in touch with all the party representatives. However, the responses that we got led us to this, and unfortunately, you are right, from the ruling party who has been ruling Turkey for over a decade, we had 3 meetings which were all cancelled before the elections, because we conducted the Turkey interviews in April, May, actually 4, one after the 7th of election as well. So there was always a study trip, something, and also with parliamentarians who were in the European Parliamentary Assembly Committee, like they were very into it, but unfortunately those meetings were cancelled. It was very unfortunate on our part, and this is what we had to present in the end. From HDP, unfortunately, it's another issue. Before the June elections, there weren't many representatives of HDP at the parliament, and not many dealing with Turkey-EU relations and Turkish foreign policy. Actually, we didn't get any response from the parliamentarians that we got in touch with, either positive or negative, from HDP. But from our party, that was the case.
The second question was dedicated to yourself.
Thank you. On refugees and partnership, whether this is going to be win-win or lose-lose for relations between EU and Turkey. I'm afraid I cannot agree with this analogy between the way we are addressing now Turkey and the pre-Arab Spring dictatorial countries. I would rather suggest another analogy, and let's forget about money for a second. Let's just focus on the action plan. And the action plan is in the spirit of the ongoing visa liberalization process. If you compare the 2 documents, visa liberalization roadmap and the action plan on migration, you will notice easily that most of the elements in the action plan are actually repeated from the visa liberalization roadmap. So it is to the benefit of Turkey to start with, to fulfill all those preconditions, all those benchmarks from the visa liberalization roadmap. Action plan only repeats them. And so I would make analogy to the countries that still have visa obligation towards the EU, than to pre-Arab Spring dictatorial states. As for the financial aspect, so border control, just to refer to that, border control is the organic element of the requirement for lifting visa obligation, and this is very much in the interest of Turkey, in preparation for the date when the readmission agreement starts being implemented. As you know, there was this 3 years period. Now, if we manage to accelerate visa liberalization process, logically readmission agreement will also start being implemented earlier. But the ball is, as I mentioned, on the Turkish side. We are there to support, to assist Turkey, of course, and here comes the issue of money. When it comes to refugee policy of Turkey, for years Ankara was telling the EU, we don't need any money. This is not a secret. And your government is admitting that that's precisely the description of the years of our dialogue on refugee issue. The Turkish government was self-confident that Turkey can handle the issue of refugees on its soil, and that was back then. The numbers were, of course, lower. Now, with the numbers growing rapidly in Turkey, Turkey has changed its policy and started asking the EU for assisting Turkey with money. So it is not our invention to start treating Turkey in an unprivileged way, but this is very much reaction to the requests coming from Turkey. I think you're right that there are many risks on the way, but if we manage to do it properly, we have chance to get win-win situation, and Turkey will get visa liberalization by also tightening border control and helping us with control of illegal migration. This is very much part of our internal EU policy. We want Turkey to be part of the same picture. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe a last round of questions, or are there any questions left? Question over there.
Merhabalar, benim ismim Alpay Alpaydın. Güvenlik çalışmaları yüksek lisans öğrencisiyim. Sorum Sayın Fidos'a olacak. Siyasi İşler Bölüm Başkanı olarak AB-Türkiye Delegasyonu'nda Türkiye'nin AB'ye girişi önündeki en önemli engeli ne olarak soruyor? Yani birbirine bağlantılı sorular olarak. En önemli siyasi sorun Türkiye'nin AB'ye girişi hakkında nedir? Eğer bunun yanıtı Kıbrıs ise, Kıbrıs konusunda bir önceki soruya verdiği yanıtta önce Kıbrıs Avrupa Birliği'ne alıp sonra sorunu çözmek yolunda bir düşüncelerinin olduğunu daha bahsetmişti. O zaman aynı şeyi Türkiye için uygulamak da mümkün olabilecek mi? Çünkü blokajda olan 17 chapter'ı açmazda olacak olan meseleleri acaba bu bakış açısıyla düşünen herhangi bir insan var mı? Türkiye önce Avrupa Birliği'ne dahil edip daha sonra bu sorunları çözmek meselesinde. Kıbrıs'la ilgili de Avrupa Birliği'nin yaptığı neler var? Onları söylemek istiyorum. Heyecanlandım biraz, kusura bakmayın soru sorarken. Bu soruyu sorarken de Kıbrıs'ın kuzey tarafına ekonomik ambargo uygulamak gibi yumuşak gücün etkilerini kullanan AB'nin güney tarafını ikna etmek için neler kullandığını merak ediyorum. Örneğin yanılmıyorsam 2000'si yani Kıbrıs'ın çözülmesi gereken bir hadise olduğu ortada. Ama bu konuda AB'nin Kıbrıs'ın güney tarafına yaptığı herhangi bir baskı ya da bu sorunun çözümüne yönelik yaptığı uyarılar, öneriler, eleştiriler neler? Bunları sormak istiyorum. Teşekkürler.
Right, I don't talk too much about Cyprus also because this is very complex and we would need to spend an hour discussing that. But on your first part of the question is what are the most significant hurdles on the way of Turkey to become a member of the EU, and of course that there's not an easy answer to that question either. But I would say that there are practical issues, and Cyprus is one of them, of course, and we are hopefully getting there in a few months' time to be very close to the settlement and inshallah to solve the settlement of Cyprus. This is one of the practical issues. Another practical issue, I mentioned borders. It is impossible to imagine Turkey becoming a member of the EU with borders with Syria and Iraq being not fully controlled. This is one of the preconditions for visa liberalization, but also psychologically, I think this is partially practical, partially related to perception. Democratization agenda, this is also both a very practical issue. We want Turkey to be fully aligned with our norms and standards when it comes to democratization, meaning proper checks and balances in the management system. And freedoms of media, freedoms of expression, non-discrimination of various minorities, etc., etc. But this is also related to perception. We need to work together, EU and Turkey, on perception, but we will not invent new perception of this process if things are not improving on the ground. On Cyprus, I don't want to go into sanctions debate. It's not needed, really. Believe me. Let's keep fingers crossed, also for Turkish government, because Turkish government has a role to play to make sure that we solve the issue of Cyprus. We see reunification next year, being endorsed legally and politically, and that will help us to advance the accession agenda with Turkey. Thank you.
Soru kalmadıysa izninizle oturumu bitirelim. Tekrar geldiğiniz için çok teşekkürler. Kendi açımızdan yani bir haber vereyim izniniz olursa. YFoT of Turkey Facebook sayfasında veya Twitter sayfalarımızda AB-Türkiye İlişkileri Hakkında bilgilendirmeler yapıyoruz. Keep following us. Hocam teşekkürler TOBB Üniversitesi'ne de. Hayırlı günler.
Biz de TESEV'e ve Young Friends of Turkey rapor sunumlarından dolayı teşekkür ediyoruz. Tüm emekleri için müteşekkiriz. Tüm katılımcılara da teşekkür ediyoruz. Sizlere de aktif katılımlarınıza, değerli sorularınıza katkı verdiğiniz için çok teşekkür ediyoruz. İnşallah başka bir toplantıda tekrar görüşmek üzere.